Hi, this is Kevin Carroll again, and today we're going to talk about some fears about the first-time homebuyer process when you're buying your first rental. And we're going to talk through that with my sister as she goes through this initial process. And I want to just reiterate the fact that there's a million different ways to buy real estate, create cash flow, and we're carving out this little grandma house niche. And so we're going to teach this process to you. Like I say, there's shiny objects everywhere. Don't get sidetracked by that stuff. Just if you focus on this plan, it'll be repeatable and replicable, and you'll be able to create significant cash flow. And the reason I do it this way is based on all the years of experience I have. So in this four-part series, we're going to talk about homebuyer fears. As you go through this process, we're going to talk about tenants and location of the house, fixing up the house, working with contractors, which is a big one, and then insurance to figure out, all the components of what if it burns down, all the things like that. So tenants, location, fixing up the house, and contractors, and insurance. So this part one video is just going to be about the tenants and the questions about the tenant themselves. And let's dig in and see what kind of fears my sister has and see if we can figure out answers to them.
Hi, everybody. I am Donna Carroll, Kevin's sister, and I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm just excited to introduce more people to this process and to help share what Kevin's been doing for the past 15 years and what he's learned. And, I love that we're just focusing on one thing. The more that I get into this studying about real estate and investing, the more I realize there's a million rabbit holes that you can go down. And I love that we're just focusing on one way that's worked, that can be repeated again and again and again and again. And having said that, I also have some fears as a first-time home buyer, as a first-time investor. It took me a long time to save up the $30,000 that I'm going to be investing in this little grandma house. And I want to make sure that I do it right. And so I have some questions, I have some fears around things going awry and things going wrong that I'm going to ask Kevin in this video. And this video is going to be specifically around tenants. The first question I have is, what if a catastrophe happens? Like the tenant's cooking dinner, they leave, they burn the house down. What do I do then?
If the tenant catches the kitchen on fire and burns the house down or half the house down, you have insurance, right? And the tenant will have insurance. So the property manager makes sure that the tenant has renter's insurance. Also, you have insurance on the house as well. You may have a deductible. I put a $2,500 deductible on my houses because I want the payments to be less. And I'm only going to use an insurance claim if I have a catastrophic event. And this would be a catastrophic event. So we're going to have another video with my insurance agent, and we can ask her in-depth questions about this stuff. But, basically, you have insurance for that. So you don't lose your investment.
That sounds great. So has anything like this ever happened to you in your rental properties?
Yeah, actually, something like this has happened. I had a sewer line backup in one of my properties, and I do pay for insurance for that. But this was a fairly simple fix. The tenant just moved in, and the house hadn't been lived in a while, and so the contractors flushed the toilets and things fine. But when someone actually started to live in it, the line plugged. So contractor, or the property manager went out right away to fix it. They couldn't, so we had to hire a plumber to do it. And in the meantime, the tenant got upset, called the health department, and moved out. And now we've got it fixed. And I gave the tenant their money back, and I offered to move them into another one of my properties. So just remember, your tenant is your customer, so you want to do the best thing for them. And so for us, that was the best thing I could do, was say, we're fixing it as fast as we can, and we're completely sorry for your this thing being a huge pain for you. And so we can move you into one of our other properties that's empty, or you can move out and we'll give you all your money back. So that's what we chose to do, and that's what they chose. So we gave them some choices.
Okay, so what do you do about the loss of income during that time?
Okay, so during that time, I had just renovated the house and I had no money coming in, and then I had some money coming in, but then I gave it back to them. So, what do you do about the loss of rent? And really, that's a great question. And for me, during the initial setup phase, these houses are not making any money until you put them in make them start performing and get a tenant in place. But if this happened, 2 years down the road, I keep a 3 month reserve of mortgage payments in my bank. And so for me, zero is 3 months of mortgage payments for all my mortgages. That way, when you have a little problem like this, um, you have some backup to cover that, and it also will cover, some of that emergency expense.
Okay, cool. So, what I'm understanding is when we do the rental analysis and when we buy the property, we make sure that we hold aside that 10% into and add that into our profit margin so that when things like this happen, we are financially prepared for that.
Yep. Yeah, that 10% will be saved into a little checking account. And basically, that goes for emergencies and repairs. And, a roof only lasts so many years. A water heater only lasts so many years. Kitchens and bathrooms, they only last so many years. So if you hold back 10%, over time, that will be enough to keep the house maintained in a nice condition.
So, what if I get a tenant in there and they stop paying rent?
So if you get a tenant and they make a couple rent payments and then they stop paying, um, that falls kind of it goes back to the property manager and how good they vetted the tenant. Make sure that your property manager has a very complete process so that you don't put a bad tenant in place. But life happens to everybody, and the tenant may have moved in, and 2 months later they lose their job. Things like that happens. So work with your property manager to figure this out. It's really their job to handle this issue. For us, in the state that we've picked, it's very landlord friendly. So if the tenant doesn't pay, you can evict them fairly quickly within 30 days. And it's a fairly, affordable process. So that's one of the things that we're going to get into when we're picking a market is picking one that is landlord friendly, and then it makes this problem and process way simpler.
Yeah, because I've heard there are horror stories around landlords not being able to evict tenants, but I live in California and that's a very renter friendly state, right? Not a landlord friendly state.
Yeah, so we'll get into way more detail about this when we look at different states in detail in the course and figure out which are very landlord friendly states. So those are the ones we're going to target first because that is a huge issue. And why try to run uphill when we don't need to? Most likely, you'll never meet your tenant. If you have trouble with them, you'll never have to deal with any issues with them at all. Like the property manager is your shield that's going to protect you from all that stuff.
Sounds like it's worth paying some good money to a property management company.
Yeah. And like we've said before in other videos, your property manager is the person that you're going to have a relationship with for 30 years. So you've got to pick the right one. And we'll go through all the steps of what makes a good property manager, how to know if they're good, and then give them a chance and try them out and see because they're all different, and they're all going to have strengths and weaknesses. And so there's certain things that you absolutely have to have with a property manager, and then there's bonuses. Otherwise, things like if they have a full repair crew, that's a bonus. Being able to collect rents and screen tenants and do all the things that a normal property manager does on a day-to-day basis, that's mandatory.
Okay, so say I found my house, I fixed it up, it looks awesome, I'm like ready to go, and I put it on the market and nothing happens. What if I can't find a renter? What do I do?
That's a great question. So that just happened to me. I bought a house and it was in pretty decent shape already. And so the property manager said, let's just try to see if we can get it rented like it is and not have to spend any more money. So, well, we put blinds and smoke detectors and things like that in, but other than that, and then it didn't rent. So 6 weeks go by and it didn't rent. It was getting showings, but it didn't rent. So I was actually in town and I stopped by with the property manager and I said, let's walk through this house and figure out why tenants aren't renting it. So, the kitchen or the bathroom had been redone. The flooring was great. The outside looked disheveled. It was like you hadn't cut your hair in 20 years. The weeds were high. The bushes were not trimmed. So the curb appeal was terrible. So we got that fixed. And then as we walked into the kitchen, it was really bad. I didn't really pay much attention to it, but as I stopped in there and looked at it, it was at the end of its useful life. So we said, okay, let's put a brand new kitchen in this thing, clean up the outside. It'll rent right away. So got a couple of bids from contractors, picked one. I just went through the walkthrough with the property manager today, and they'll be finished here in a couple hours. The cleaning lady's coming in this afternoon to clean it, and the property manager will be back with their marketing camera probably tomorrow to get new marketing photos, and we'll be back on the market ready to rent, and it should rent up right away.
Okay, so what you're saying is that I need to partner with my property manager. It's a very important 30-year relationship. And because they know the local markets, they know the housing in that area, that they can help me to figure out what to do if it's not renting.
Yeah, because they have, the leasing agents in their office are showing this prospective tenant a couple different houses, right? And so they're looking at your competition as well. And so they're going to see like, okay, this tenant looked at your house and two other ones and they chose a different one. Well, why is that? Like, well, it had a better backyard, or it had, your kitchen was inadequate. It was totally dysfunctional. Or like, tell me why, if is there something that we could do better? And so there's really three things. You've got location, and you've got your condition of the house, and you have the price of the rent. Those are your three factors, your three levers you can pull. And for us, the condition was inferior, and so we fixed that issue. Now, the location is actually our next video, and we're going to talk about that. You can't change your location, so you got to pick that wisely, and we'll be talking to all the details about that in the next video. So thank you very much. Like and subscribe down below. It really helps our channel.
Thank you so much, Kevin, big brother. I feel, I feel better having you on my team. I feel better. I would never feel like be able to do this without your guidance. So I really appreciate you answering all these questions, and I can't wait to talk about location next week. And I have some questions around the crazy cat lady as my neighbor. That's another fear.
Check out our video coming out every Thursday.